Good evening. Welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Licensing Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Ashraf, Chair of the committee. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight. In the event of fire alarm, please leave the building via the spiral staircase and main reception door. Once outside, turn left and go to the fire assembly point on Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, you will be guided by the member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the Council YouTube channel. Please note that there is no comment function available. The Council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast in accordance with the Council's published data retention policy. Anyone seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the room, you are consenting to your image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting or training purposes. The meeting agenda is available on the Council's website. To my right are the committee members who will be taking decisions on the items before them, and to my left, actually on both sides, yeah, there are officers and the members. So, first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
We've received no apologies.
Thank you. Disclosure of interest. I will now call upon committee members one by one to declare any interest in the relation to either of the items. You are also advised to declare if you have been lobbied on either item. Councillor Abu Musa.
Good evening, Chair. No declaration of interest. I have been lobbied in item 6. Thank you.
Councillor Ayling.
Yeah, I've got no declaration of interest, but I've been lobbied on item 6.
Councillor Balbin.
Thank you. I have no declarations of interest, but again, I have been lobbied on agenda item 6.
Councillor Burgess.
Oh, thank you. No, I have not been lobbied, and I have no interests. No.
Councillor Bark.
No declaration of interest, and I have not been lobbied.
Councillor Bushnell.
No declaration and no lobbying.
Councillor Crowe.
Good evening, Chairman. No declarations of interest, and I've been lobbied on agenda item 6.
No declaration of interest, and I've just checked, and I haven't been lobbied on item 6. I have not been lobbied on item 6. I just wanted to check.
Councillor Irvine.
No lobbying and no interest, Chair.
Councillor Jagger.
Good evening. I have no interest to declare, and I have been lobbied on item 6.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. No declaration of interests, and I have been lobbied on item 6.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. No declaration to declare or interest to declare. I have been lobbied on item number 6.
Councillor Noyes.
No declarations to declare, and I haven't been lobbied either.
Councillor Yani.
Thank you, Chair. I have no declaration of interest and I have not been lobbied.
Finally, I declare my interest. I have no interest to declare, but I've been lobbied on item 6. Thank you. Item 3 minutes. The last meeting was held on 18th March 25. Does the committee agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting?
Agree.
Item 4, licensing subcommittee minutes. We have two sets of licensing subcommittee minutes for approval. The first is the minutes of the meeting of 10th March 25. Does the committee agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting?
I do.
The second is the minutes of the meeting of 15 April 25. Does the committee agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Item 5, public question time. We will now move on to the public question time. The Constitution states that this item will last for 15 minutes and questions need to relate to an item on the agenda. Please note that this is separate to the rights granted to specific individuals who have registered to speak on an agenda item. So I will call on those individuals later in the meeting instead. In the meantime, are there any questions from the members of the public? Thank you. Please.
Airport Cars Gatwick. I'm also a Unite the Union representative for the drivers at Airport Cars Gatwick. My question is actually to the licensing department about the Group 2 medical. We've been asking for the choice to go elsewhere for the last 18 months and still have not had a response from the licensing department. So my question is to them, why has it taken so long? We had an email from you a few months ago saying that you were nearly there, but not quite yet, and you were going to ask for D for medicals to do the medicals. So can I ask where we are now?
Thank you. Can I ask Corinne to please provide an update?
Yes, of course, Chair. Thank you. Corinne Plimpton, the Licensing Manager for Crawley Borough Council. In relation to Group 2 medicals, we are mid-discussions with a service provider and we are waiting for a service level agreement from that service provider to offer alternatives to drivers to be able to access that service at a competitive rate to the standard required by the authority. We are, as an authority, ready to progress, but we are waiting for that final documentation from that nominated supplier, so we are beholden to them and the delay is down to them. There have been some changes in personnel with that service provider, which has meant we've had to recommence some of the discussions. But we are, apologies to reiterate the point, but we are very nearly there. But as I say, we are beholden to the service provider to provide us with documentation to ensure that the requirements are going to be met by that provider in multiple locations to ensure that the maximum accessibility for the trade at a competitive rate.
Thank you. Do you have any supplementary question?
Is the company D for medicals? And can I ask, what other companies have you gone to ask about medicals? Because there's only as far as I know, there's only one company out there that does them in this area, and that is D for medicals. So why has it taken so long?
Sorry, we cannot mention any specific names at this stage.
But can I ask, why has it taken so long? 18 months to nearly 2 years I've been asking for this.
Sorry, we gave you the answer, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? Thank you. Item 6, proposed revisions to private hire and Hackney Carriage licensing policy. We will now move on to the report HCS/097. Please, will the team leader for health, safety and licensing present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may make an assumption that you and your colleagues have read the report in full, I don't propose to read it verbatim unless directed otherwise by you. May I do an executive summary of the report? Thank you, Chair. So at section 1 of the report, it provides the purpose of today's meeting in relation to the proposed revision to the Council's Hackney Carriage and private hire licensing policy, which was in fact last revised on the 5th of March through this committee, and to further amend the content of the policy in light of the statutory taxi standards, the best practice guidance, and where appropriate, update licensing conditions to ensure regulatory compliance and to ensure that public safety remains the focus and the overriding purpose of the licensing regime. This is further highlighted in the National Audit on Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, also known as the Casey Review. The review was also prompted by this committee at its last meeting on the 5th of March, and a public consultation took place in relation to the proposed revisions to elements of the licensing policy, and that consultation took place between the 10th of July and the 11th of August of this year. There were several key areas that this committee directed officers to consult on, including vehicle livery and mandatory CCTV to include audio and visual capabilities, with the overarching aim of enhancing public safety as the primary purpose of the licensing regime, aligning with both national statutory taxi standards, best practice, also to seek an improvement to clarity and consistency across the licensed trade, as well as measures to improve public safety for both the public and drivers. As I've said previously, the primary purpose of the licensing regime is public safety. You'll see at section 2 of the report there are a series of recommendations that you and your colleagues will be considering today arising from that. If I can summarise with you the key recommendations or options for consideration this evening, they relate to a vehicle livery, and officers support the removal of roof boxes and door signage from private hire vehicles in line with national best practice guidance, which helps prevent confusion between Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. For vehicles operating at Gatwick Airport, officers support the change from teal to yellow plates as proposed to improve consistency and visibility across the private hire trade as an entity, as a whole entity. Officers also support the Hackney Carriage vehicles rebranding exercise with new door signage to improve public identification and reinforce their availability for immediate hire. Members will also note the range of options for discussion this evening and the proposed implementation timetable. Recommendations also include consideration of whether or not to mandate CCTV, both audio and visual capabilities, as well as panic buttons when the vehicle engine is on. This aligns with the statutory taxi standards, best practice guidance, and the Casey Review, which highlights the role of CCTV in safeguarding vulnerable passengers and protecting drivers from false allegations and other issues of crime and disorder. The Commission of Crime, in which it also supports investigations and outcomes when they are presented to the service for consideration. Licensed drivers play a key role in promoting public safety. The most recent Casey Review also highlights the importance of CCTV as a tool to safeguard, deter crime and provide reassurance to both drivers and passengers, and that's detailed for you at 6.12 to 6.23 of the report. It's also recommendations or consideration and support for electronic payment facilities. All licensed vehicles and operators must offer card or electronic payment mechanisms alongside cash by 1st of January 2027. This reflects modern passenger expectations and improves accessibility. There's also a recommendation to consider a tyre tread depth to align those with MOT standards. Currently it's 2 millimetres, but we're asking that it's adjusted to 1.6 millimetres to be effective towards the end of this year. This will improve clarity for drivers, our nominated garages who are carrying out vehicle checks, and reduces the cost for vehicle proprietors. And I've noted already about the livery recommendations also. In the report itself, at section 6, it gives you an overview of the consultation feedback, which was carried out over that period previously mentioned, and the respondents, including licensed drivers, private hire operators, members of the public, and statutory partners. There are a range of different elements of feedback from the trade in relation to the proposals regarding mandatory CCTV with audio and visual capabilities, the inclusion of panic buttons, and concerns surrounding the elements of privacy, cost and data protection management. However, circumstances in which systems would be accessed by the authority, if it were to be mandated this evening, would be carefully managed, and these are detailed at 6.17. It should be noted, however, that statutory partners strongly support mandatory CCTV with audio, visual and recording capabilities, as well as a panic button. Sussex Police have endorsed the CCTV with audio and visual capabilities, as well as panic buttons for both drivers and passengers as vital tools for safeguarding, crime prevention and public reassurance. Mid-Sussex County Council also shared their positive outcomes from their own mandatory CCTV policy, including reduced complaints against drivers and also by passengers more generally, and improved driver protection. The proposed changes are grounded in national guidance and statutory duties. Section 177 of the Policing and Crime Act 2017 requires licensing authorities to have regard to all guidance aimed at protecting children and vulnerable adults. Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act also obliges councils to consider the impact of decisions on crime prevention, community safety, and to do all it reasonably can to address these issues. Furthermore, the Equalities Act requires due regard regarding equality and accessibility. And as I've mentioned previously, the statutory taxi standards, best practice guidance and the Casey review are also key documents and matters that you would need to consider in any determination. The proposed policy revisions aim to enhance public and driver safety, improve the identification and visibility of licensed vehicles, noticing the differences between Hackney carriages and private hire regimes, which are distinct and different in the services that they offer and the way in which those services are delivered, to ensure consistency in application of driver, vehicle and operator standards which mirror statutory guidance, best practice and legal obligations, and to future-proof the licensing regime against emerging risks and expectations. It should be noted that the safety and well-being of both licensed drivers and passengers are of key importance, supported by the statutory taxi standards, the best practice guidance and the Casey review, as I stated previously, which includes the recommendation to mandate CCTV in licensed vehicles and also put an end to cross-border hiring to improve safeguarding measures for both the licensed trade and passengers. And members will be aware that this authority has lobbied central government on a number of occasions to change the law in relation to cross-border hiring amid concerns about safety and standardisation amongst the trade. If members and the committee agree to the recommendations, officers will need to finalise the policy wording and licence conditions, work toward the agreed implementation timetable, which has been mirrored for you in the report before you this evening, and work with legal services on the procurement and data management of the CCTV systems if approved, and various other matters to be considered under the delegation scheme in conjunction with the Head of Community Services, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Public Protection and the Chair and Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee, and amend the policy accordingly. Chair, in conclusion, I know that there's a rather lengthy report in front of you and your colleagues today, but I haven't gone through it verbatim. But whilst consultation feedback that is before you has been mixed, the overriding principle of public safety must guide your decision-making, along with a clear rationale to apply or not if you make any material changes to the policy. So if you decide to implement option A, option B, option C, you must give reasons and a rationale for that decision as to whether or not, as to why you are adopting it, or indeed conversely not adopting a proposal. These proposals it submitted represent a balanced and proportionate response to the statutory taxi standards alongside national and local concerns regarding the standards, but the overriding principle is public safety. Chair, I appreciate that I've done an executive summary, but I'm happy to take any questions should there be any arising from the report.
Thank you. I'll use my discretion as chair to allow the 3 speakers who have requested in advance to address the committee. Firstly, please will Asad Satti from the Crawley Hackney Carriage Association approach the speaker's table. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, and you will see the countdown clock to my left. The microphone is turned on using the right button. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Asad Satti, representing here Crawley Hackney Carriage Association. We have concerns about mandatory CCTV going to install in our vehicles. We just want to make it very clear that we have nothing to hide about our work, but we always try and ready to maintain high standard of service. However, having CCTV in our taxis having many disadvantages, such as, number one, privacy concerns. Privacy of passenger and drivers both compromised by having mandatory CCTV in our cars. Buying, installing, and maintaining CCTV is very expensive. We are already struggling with rising costs. As you're all aware, everything gone very high and our income going day by day down. We are going through the worst time of taxi period, as I'm working in this trade 15 years, but I never saw this kind of time in my taxi career. So we humbly request, don't do it mandatory at this level, because this will make our living more difficult. This will be an extra headache and tension for all of us. Passengers may feel safety and privacy issues by traveling with CCTV installed vehicles, and they prefer to take other options like Uber. And as you're all aware of cross-border hiring, so many other nearby councils, it's so easy to get the license, and they're working within Crawley Borough Council. And obviously they don't follow that rules. They don't have CCTV in their cars. So passengers may prefer to go with them. It will cost an extra burden on shoulder of drivers. Sometime all the drivers, when they're sitting, they may, they can't go home all the time to discuss with doctor or their family. Like when we are free, sometime we just during the work, when we sit down somewhere, we talk to the doctor, or our privacy, like with family or any other issues. So all compromised. Data may leak. We have this concern as well. So maybe somebody been able to tell us. So this is also our concern. So all these related to CCTV. And the second, I don't want to go out of your agenda, but second in your agenda is signage related. So I humbly request councillors and the licensing officers, we as a Hackney trade, we are struggling for the signage, especially Crawley High Street, the Jubilee Oak rank, there's no signage, and private cars always parked up because there's no clear signage for taxis. There's no proper kind of, all the time people parked up by private cars. There's another lay-by just after Troy Kebab, beginning of High Street. That lay-by, we've been told that for us during 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., Friday and Saturday. So it's always occupied by the private cars. I know it's not out of, because we're not going to discuss here to remove our signs. It's only for the private hire. So as a Hackney trade, I think the old door signs and roof sign will stay as it is. So it's pretty much related to signage. That's why I'm trying to request you that please think about this and do something that we can have some more business. So these are our reasons, and we respectfully oppose especially mandatory CCTV in taxis, and we strongly recommend considering alternative safety measures that secure safety without affecting privacy of drivers and customers, or imposing any extra costs on drivers' living. I hope our concern will be taken into serious account and remain working together that genuinely protect both drivers and passengers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Please will Nicholas Vaines from Unite now approach the speaker's table. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick Vaines. I'm a Unite representative from Gatwick Airport. Thank you for listening to us today, once again. Regarding CCTV, we understand that it is only best practice at the moment to come in. It's not mandatory to come in as a national standard or a minimum national standard. We understand because of the Casey report, we understand that at some point it will actually come in at some point, but the problem being is the cost. The cost, and we only have one provider in Crawley at the moment, is £640 for one camera at the moment. And to actually put that burden on the driver is actually, unless the council want to pay for it, you know, that's not a problem. But to actually put that burden on the driver at the moment is actually, as you can see, the decline in the work that everybody is mentioning so far. We also have a bit of a concern regarding the vehicles. We have vehicles at the moment that are, some are high end, but if we go and buy a vehicle that has a warranty, we need assurance that this will not affect the warranty, because some of the vehicles that we're having are electric. And if they are going to be cutting into the system, then who is liable for if it is going to make a problem or cause a problem down the line regarding the warranty? Because we know these vehicles are £40,000, £50,000, £60,000, or even the one that you buy from a say Mercedes or some VW, you actually get an extended warranty with them. So if it affects your warranty, who's going to be liable for that? You can't expect the driver to be liable for that, because it's going to be mandatory if you're going to bring it in mandatory. So we have to look at that side of it as well. If it's going to be certificated by the person, that's fine. We have actually given, when we had a consultation with the licensing officers, we actually did give you another provider, which was far cheaper, like 50% cheaper. We don't know, well, we know for a fact that they haven't been contacted, because we actually contacted them today and they said that they haven't been contacted, and we gave this over 3 months ago. So that's, you know, why we're not being able to go somewhere else is actually a monopoly if you actually have to go through one provider within the town. Regarding the being able to turn it off, so that if I'm using that vehicle in social and domestic, then I understand that it is still a licensed vehicle, but if I'm using it social and domestic, as I can, regarding my insurance as well, then there should be a button there where I turn it off, so that it is going to be for private use. The default position when you actually get in the vehicle and you turn your vehicle on, it actually comes on. The actual CCTV comes on. So you need a button there to be able to turn it off. If I've got my children, my grandchildren in the vehicle, then I don't see why it should be able to be looked at any point. Also, the remote access. We have a bit of a problem with remote access. Does that mean that's going to be somebody within the council can actually think, oh, I'm going to check up on Nick Veens today. Let's just see what he's doing. Does that mean that they're actually going to turn it on and have a look at what I'm doing? Because we actually know for a fact that they do that in Rotherham. They do that in Rotherham. But so that makes it a little bit of a more of a bit, you know, not so good for us. Also regarding the Casey report, yeah. Totally agree with the Casey report. There are major problems across regarding cross-border hire, so hopefully that will be addressed at some point. Looking at the drivers, the importance of the, if you look at the graphs that we've been sent, it says the importance of it. 78% of the drivers say no, it's not important. But 67% of the general public say it's not important as well. So, I mean, I think that has to be taken into account, because if the general public, they're the ones we're supposed to be safeguarding, or you guys are supposed to be safeguarding, so why don't we look at that as well, what they're saying? Because if you look through I have it in front of me now, you know, they do not support it. So if it's not supported, then, you know, why are you guys going to be bringing it in? Because it is only best practice. If it become a standard, like a national standard, don't like the term minimum standard, but if it is a national standard, then I get it. But if it's only best practice, that isn't mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, will the Peter Bailey from Airport Cars Gatwick now approach the speaker's table? You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. My name is Peter Bailey. I'm Head of Operations and Commercial for Airport Cars Gatwick. I've spent a 48-year tenure in both the private hire and black taxi Hackney Carriage in running taxi companies in London, Asia and across Europe. I've been at Gatwick for 4 years, and I'm here just to really endorse some of the recommendations that I heard earlier on from Ms Plimpton regarding signage and the colour of licence plates on the airport cars vehicles. We support the proposal to remove rooftop boxes from the vehicles, as we stated in our previous submission to the Licensing Committee in March 2025. And this is a view that is also shared by my largest client, which is Gatwick Airport. We are of the opinion that best practice guidance states that local licensing authorities should not permit roof signs of any kind on private hire vehicles. This will help differentiate the private hire vehicle from the traditional Hackney vehicle. We believe the rooftop boxes can have the opposite effect sometimes in suggesting to a member of the public that the vehicle is actually a Hackney carriage rather than a private hire vehicle. With regards to any safety concerns regarding passengers identifying their vehicle, which I've heard people make representation to, we're of the opinion that our current dispatch and booking system and most proprietary systems that are on the market normally send texts, email confirmations for every booking, and also when a vehicle is en route, they will send the driver, vehicle information, colour of vehicle, along with driver's details. Given the level of data that we currently send to our clients, we do not feel that any increased signage would add any enhancement to the concise information that we currently already provide. We also believe that our dedicated passenger pickup points at both the terminals at Gatwick are not accessible to members of the public or their vehicles. So again, we believe there should be no issue with clients being able to identify their private hire vehicle given the official locations that we are parked in. Due to the increased presence of ride-hailing at Gatwick campus and its environs, we're also looking to carry out increased volumes of work for third parties and other transportation aggregators in order to keep our drivers' livelihoods afloat. Invariably, these companies require vehicles to be unbranded in order to fulfill their work. Again, increased signage would only stifle my attempts to bring new business at a time when ride-hailing is having such an adverse effect on our company and its workforce. With regards to plates, Airport Cars Gatwick has had a brand refresh in 2024, and we aligned our business to the airport's colour scheme of wayfinding, which is traditionally black and yellow, as is most international airports. The brand is extremely visible, and we believe that a move to a yellow licence plate would have the following benefit. The yellow plate would align with the vehicles and corporate colour scheme of our company. We would have a uniform yellow licence plate would allow our workforce to work at a different private hire operator during the winter seasonal downturn, where drivers tend to migrate to other operators or other forms of work during the winter season when the airport is traditionally quiet. This would facilitate this without the need to incur additional costs in order to change their plate from the current teal colour to yellow. From an aesthetics stance, the use of the teal colour has also been dropped from Gatwick Airport branding since they rebranded in 2024, and the airport are keen to ensure that no teal branding moves forward on future vehicles or collateral. In summary, both ACG Management and Gatwick Airport Limited are of the belief that the aforementioned items make sound operational sense, do not raise any significant concerns of safety to the general public, and would also cut down on costs and administration for both the ACG force and the Crawley licensing team. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The committee will now consider the matter. Committee members wishing to speak should raise their hand and officers will respond to queries one by one. Thank you. Do you have any questions? No. Councillor Nawaz.
I think someone has to start, isn't it? So, Chair, thank you, Chair. So I think I'll start. First of all, wholeheartedly thankful to the officers bringing a comprehensive report to us as we asked in the last time, and really good stats in the survey side of as well. And I think report is really comprehensive, and I think most part I agree, but I have a few questions to start with. We mentioned a few things over here. Safety, feeling of safety. When I look at the numbers, the importance of CCTV, feeling of safety, and all the mandatory CCTVs, all the options 6.3 or 6.12 all the way to 6.5, 6.6. They all supported quite strongly as a no from the drivers, the public, and all that. At one stat I was looking at 84% of the public actually saying it's not important and they always feel safe in Crawley. And that is really good stat to be proud of. That means our trade is really doing very well. And they are look after their customers, and they never feel that this is quite an important item for them. So how come this play against, the strong recommendation as officers are saying is probably important, where public in Crawley and drivers in Crawley not feeling that way?
Thank you. Can I screen, please?
Chair, the consultation was undertaken and it provides a snapshot of feedback from the community, both drivers and members of the public. I draw your attention to the report, which makes reference to the statutory taxi standards. Those are statutory standards that the Department for Transport expects licensing authorities to implement and give reasons for implementing aspects or not. You've obviously also seen the reference to the best practice guidance, which also commends the implementation of CCTV as a safety mechanism, as well as the statutory taxi standards. And most pertinent, I suppose, the most recent document is the Casey review, where it's been clear that they are recommending the installation of CCTV to support both members of the public and drivers in light of various concerns raised regarding child sexual exploitation, vulnerable passengers and so on. As a licensing authority, as the licensing team, we do have a number of complaints that are made against drivers and conversely against the conduct of passengers against our drivers. And where CCTV is in evidence, it makes the investigation process far quicker, far easier, and in the majority of instances, because our drivers are of a good standard, we are able to feed back to the travelling public that the complaint that they have made is not substantiated because of the presence of CCTV. We also have a number of licensed drivers who have a requirement for CCTV which has both audio and visual capabilities because of different transgressions and behaviours, and in order to try and support them in maintaining a career within the licensed trade, they have had that CCTV system installed as a condition on their licence or to help modify behaviours. And the feedback that we've had from those drivers, albeit a small number, who have audio and visual CCTV, is that they are very grateful for its presence because it's been able to rebut complaints, concerns that have been raised. I do want to make the point, if I may, Chair, and please direct me if this is not the right point. It is not the proposal of the licensing authority to have remote access to view CCTV on a whim. There would be specific circumstances where we would look to download audio and visual recordings to check for compliance in specific circumstances, to facilitate an investigation similar to the one that I've just referred to you, where complaints or concerns have been raised by any persons such as passengers, drivers or authorised officers, where a licensed driver's fitness and propriety is called into question, or following a request from other regulatory partners such as the police. And you'll see that within the report there is a long implementation period proposed to allow us to iron out any legal requirements and to ensure that where data is sought or information is viewed via CCTV, audio and visual capabilities, that's done with a very clear process in mind. The authority will not be looking at general CCTV just on a Sunday afternoon has been referenced. It will be in specific circumstances and because of specific matters that have come to light. Yes. In section 6.13 of the report, it gives you an overview of those concerns that have been raised and hopefully mitigation against some of those concerns that have been raised. there was a suggestion that there is currently a monopoly in place with regard to CCTV providers. If a mandatory CCTV system with auditory and visual capabilities were to be agreed, there would be a process where a number of suppliers would be invited to tender the process and selected in accordance to the Council's policy and standards, as well as very careful data management processes being put in place and standards of CCTV imagery and so on for evidential purposes. Further consideration has been given and reference made to the cost. Yes, it's correct, it's about £600, but it is considered to be a tool of the trade and therefore tax deductible. And actually you can rent a system for less than it costs one to rent a mobile phone. On average, we've looked at research and it's about £25 a month to rent the system, which includes free downloads, but it is dependent on which service providers we will look to utilise if approved.
Thank you. You have any supplementary question?
Thanks for detailed answer, Corinne. On a few of the very good points been raised by some of the speakers from the trade as well. One of them is quite important, cost of living. You try to answer that, so I understand we're there. But looking for the level playing field, that is a big concern when you look at the invasive approach of having a CCTV. And given that none of our neighbouring boroughs have that implemented yet, biggest thing is at the moment, at the moment is Uber, is elephant in the room. Uber haven't got that installed at the moment. So how that is going to be addressed with that, with people's concern, and trade is really, really worried about that, those kind of things, and I think they have right to be worried about it.
Thank you. Please.
Chair, if I may, in fact, Transport for London, who license Uber, do mandate CCTV, and many of our neighbouring authorities have either mandated CCTV or are mindful of the statutory taxi standards and the KC review and are on that journey. One of our nearest neighbours, Mid Sussex, for example, has mandated the requirement for CCTV, and you'll see the feedback from the lead member there in the body of your report as part of the appendices. So there are other authorities. Guildford is another neighbouring authority that has mandated CCTV, which has visual and audio capabilities. In fact, I've got a number of authorities across Sussex who are on that journey in the same way as Crawley, and also colleagues in Surrey. And I have a table of information that we are populating with authorities that have implemented CCTV as an important mechanism to support both licensed drivers and the travelling public. So the reference that Uber drivers don't have to have it is not correct, I'm afraid. It may be the case in some authorities where they have not reached the conclusion on the issue of CCTV, but Transport for London, Mid Sussex and others, to name a few, Brighton and Hove another, do mandate CCTV.
Thank you. Councillor Hilton, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for everyone in the gallery who turned up and made the representations tonight. I understand in terms of public support, in terms of consultation, it was heavily against some of these measures, particularly in terms of CCTV. But personally, I think that public safety and particularly safeguarding trumps a lot of things in my book. Public support is we need to take people with us, but I cannot ignore recommendations which ignores the Casey report. I think the Casey report is important. It's good that everyone says we should support it, but you need to put your money where your mouth is and support the recommendations in practice. And I think that some of the things the case report talks about in terms of vulnerabilities and stuff and the Equalities Act, etc., is important to consider. I'm also mindful of the police, what the police have said in terms of community safety and safety. I'm also mindful of what Mid Sussex District Council have said and the Cabinet Member for District Mid Sussex District Council, and they've said since it's been introduced in 2024, there has been much problems. However, I do have an issue with the wording of the recommendation in item D, because I refer to Annex 12 of the taxi guidance, and the wording about operational times when the vehicle engine is on and mandated doesn't quite tally with what Annex 12 says. And I don't know if I should just read it out or just paraphrase it, but I'll probably just read it out. It is important to note that in most circumstances, the licensed authority which mandates installation of CCTV system needs a data controller. So in terms of those kind of issues we discussed about Sunday afternoon, the data controller, and what that means is that the privacy, etc., under Article 8 of the ECHR, as covered by the 98 Human Rights Act, should be respected, particularly with that particular part, privacy. And licensing authorities should consider how systems are configured should they mandate CCTV. For instance, vehicles may not be exclusively used for business, also serve as a car for personal use. It should therefore be possible to manually switch the system off when not being used for hire. Authorities should consider the Information Committee's review on this matter, that in most cases, the requirement for continuous operation is unlikely to be fair and lawful process of personal data. So on that basis, although I support the introduction of CCTV, my personal view is that the recommendation in item D doesn't meet the requirements of Annex 12, and I'd find it quite hard to support it. But I would support it for the reasons I've put in earlier. And my last statement would be concerning, I accept there is costs, etc., but the lead-in time is quite long on this, and I'm not going to tell people how they should run their business and stuff, but because the lead-in time is long, it's something we can look at and hopefully iron out some kind of issue. So I do support the recommendation of CCTV, but I would probably suggest an amendment to Section D in terms of the wording because of Annex 12 CCTV guidance, which is in the statutory taxing private hire vehicle guidance on Gov UK.
Thank you. Can I ask Green to please answer this?
Indeed, Chair. Section 6, 6.16, leading on to 6.24, I believe, covers the issue of CCTV and privacy. It is proposed that the council would be the data controller. As officers, we do not support the turning off of CCTV. We believe that the proposal meets the requirements of the statutory taxi standards and has regard to the best practice guidance. However, we would be concerned that, not saying any of our existing licensed drivers would behave inappropriately necessarily, but a licensed driver could turn the system off to commission an offence or carry out an offence and therefore avoid detection. This authority believes that there are adequate measures in place as proposed in the report to protect privacy, to ensure accessing of the system only in specific circumstances as set out at 6.17 of the report, and that actually the system needs to activate when the engine is turned on. A licensed vehicle is a licensed vehicle at all times. It would not be appropriate nor the requirement of the authority to just monitor the CCTV system for system's sake. It would be for specific circumstances that have been set out in 6.17 of the report, and that there would be careful mechanisms in place to ensure that that information was accessed legitimately and appropriately by the licensing authority and by other regulatory partners. So, for example, if there was an offence that had been taking place or an allegation of an offence, the police would need to come to the council as the licensing authority and the data controller and put a reasoned argument forward as to why they want to view particular footage at a certain time and date. And that would then be vetted, for want of a better expression, and as appropriate, that information released for legitimate purposes. Licensing colleagues and myself do not support a system that a driver could disable for the reasons I've set out previously, and we are content with the various lead-in times that are proposed for the 2-year period, that we would iron out any challenges as have been presented. We have already been working with neighbouring authorities where they have implemented the system and it works to good effect when it's operational at all times. The panic button in terms of audio recording would activate the audio recording. The CCTV imagery would be accessed and operational all the time. A panic button can be activated by either a licensed driver or an individual, because there are times where licensed drivers are facing abuse, facing allegations of misconduct and so on. So it is entirely appropriate that those panic buttons are located both in the driver's side and the passenger side of the vehicle, but we do not support the system being turned off manually by a licensed driver or another person. As I've stated, and I cannot reiterate the point clearly enough, the system would be accessed in specific circumstances and it needs to be operational. There would be little point in having a CCTV system that could be manually turned off. And that is not how it works in other authorities who have already mandated CCTV, both audio and visual capabilities.
Thank you. Councillor Kroll now, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's interesting following on from Councillor Hilton and Councillor Nawaz, because it struck me that Councillor Hilton has read the report, but I'm not so sure that Councillor Nawaz has, because he referenced neighbouring authorities, and of course Mid-Sussex, the feedback which Councillor Hilton referenced is very clear, and that feedback, by the way, is cross-party. If you look at those councillors who have signed that feedback to this council, it's from the administration and from the opposition. More generally, I do think this committee makes heavy weather out of issues relating to taxis. My sort of general principle is that I support best practice, but I also don't like to see over-regulation. I don't like to see things being too onerous upon the trade. You know, we've heard the speakers tonight, and you know, I'm sure we all recognise and sympathise with the difficulties that are being experienced within the trade, and clearly that is not good. I welcome what the officer said earlier in relation to I think it was something that Mr. Vines raised about private use and not sort of being effectively sort of spied on. I wouldn't want to see that at all, and I want to make sure that safeguards are in place, and it sounds like they are from what the officer said. It's quite clear what the direction of travel is, and the direction of travel is that all like taxis will be having CCTV at some point. It's how and when we get there locally. The feedback from Mid-Sussex was quite interesting, where it's been in for a couple of years from the letter, and I very much welcome the protection for drivers who not only do I think this helps to reduce the risk of bad behaviour, or indeed in some cases potentially violence towards drivers, but also it helps to protect them from false and malicious allegations, which I suspect do happen a lot more than we would like to see, and hopefully just stop them from being made in the first place. It's interesting to hear that other authorities are going down this route as well. And something else that's worth thinking about as well is that Mid-Sussex, which is our largest neighbour in terms of surrounding most of Crawley, have gone down this route. And in 2.5 years and just over 1 week, this council will be part of the same council as Mid-Sussex District Council, or whatever that new council looks like, unless the government adopt the bonkers Brighton proposal that puts in Mid-Sussex with East Sussex, but that isn't realistically likely to happen. So we know pretty much that this council will be aligned with Mid-Sussex and be part of the same future authority, and therefore there will have to be an alignment of the standards across taxis for those two authorities, whatever that looks like, but recognising that we've got this direction of travel for CCTV as well. So really, for me, the question is, the lead-in times. I'm interested to know a little bit more about that from officers. If how much discretion there is in terms of, because I'm just conscious that of the pressure on drivers. A bit of information about how much flexibility there is in terms of if the committee was minded to pass that CCTV is mandatory, how long it has to be before everyone actually has to have it in, and whether we know whether there's any technologies that are going to make the systems cheaper, because the £640 cost is significant, and if your trade is struggling, I'm not comfortable about putting on an extra burden onto effectively what a small business is. So a bit more information around that, and whether potentially those costs might become a little bit less if the CCTV systems continue to improve with technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. So if I could provide some further clarity on access of any proposed systems. So Councillor Hilton's point about what the Information Commissioner has stated is absolutely correct, but it's really important to note that the Biometrics and Surveillance Commissioner is a different part of government and a different commissioner. Yes, Article 8 rights must be considered, which is the right to privacy, but it is a qualified right. And one of the ways that we as a public body can interfere with that right is for a legitimate aim, and one of those is safeguarding people or preventing crime and disorder. If it was to be introduced, these systems and these cameras would be treated in the same way that this council treats public space surveillance systems, in that the officers accessing those systems would have to be qualified. So they would be required to hold a public space surveillance qualification, which will teach the officers all of those things around how to mitigate the impact on Article 8 human rights infringements. But also these systems are audited. To Mr. Bean's point, if an officer was to log into that system on a Sunday afternoon, we'd know. The other point is, if at any point we are accessing these systems, the driver would know, because we would have to notify the driver, because they are a subject within the data that we are processing, and in all circumstances it would be linked to an incident that the driver themselves has highlighted to us, or a member of the public has highlighted to us, and in all cases where we receive a complaint about a driver or from a driver, other parties are notified as part of that. So just to alleviate those concerns, the qualifications and the safeguards would be rigorous. We would also require an additional CCTV and surveillance policy as part of that, and that would go through the governance committee. So the lead-in time, being as long as it is, provides us a really good period of time to procure that system. So the costs that have been talked about, around £600, yes, there would be potentially opportunities to reduce those costs even further, but that 2 years gives us the time to procure that system properly, find the best value for the council and for the drivers, and to enable us to introduce those processes to really safeguard any data that's collected as part of this proposal. And it's also really important to note that the statutory taxi standards are more of an opt-out than an opt-in. So we have to provide that really robust response to the Department of Transport about why we have not introduced those standards. So the recommendations in the report are strong because they are the statutory taxi standards, that's the guidance from the DFT, and if the committee makes a decision this evening not to implement that, we have to provide that rationale to the DFT. So our recommendations are based upon that, and being able to provide that to government.
Thank you. Councillor Bablan.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers for a very comprehensive report and their answers to our questions. I am pleased to hear that perhaps the cost could be reduced in the future, because it is a sizable sum of money. But I'd also like to highlight to the committee that this consultation and the public stroke passengers answers were probably done online. And I am not naive. There is a high response rate there on that online consultation. is not, we haven't had the resources to be able to go out on the street and do person-to-person consultation to know that these responses are unbiased. When we did the dogs on lead, we had a very high response rate, and it was felt at the time that perhaps certain people were making sure that certain answers got recorded. So I do think committee needs to look at safety of passengers as a priority and not necessarily at what this consultation is indicating, that the public are feeling totally safe. I'd also like to point out that a relative many years ago picked up 2 young girls in the rain hitchhiking to give them a lift to Peace Pottage. They came to Crawley and they said, "We're going to tell people that you have assaulted us if you don't take us to Brighton." He was quite, he wasn't naive, and he said, "I've got to stop and get something." And he walked up to the police station and told the police what they were, allegations they were putting. And he said, "They're in my car, can you go and talk to them, please?" And the police went and talked to these 2 girls. It is also, if we have CCTV, it does protect the drivers as well. And I with everybody saying it's best practice and fellow councillors around us doing it, I think we have got to go down this route. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to come back on anything?
Yes, Chair. Obviously, you've got the statutory taxi standards that aim to ensure some consistency across all licensing authorities of an approach. I'm part of a working group in relation to CCTV across Sussex to standardise an approach with regard to CCTV in licensed vehicles. Sympathetic to the trade entirely about the cost implications, but it is tax deductible and it is over a period of the life of the vehicle, and it can be transferred from vehicle to vehicle if a vehicle is changed. It's about public safety. The primary purpose of the licensing regime is public safety. And whilst the authority is sympathetic to the financial challenges faced by the trade, that is not your primary consideration as the licensing committee. It is public safety. And by public safety, not only do I mean members of the travelling public, but also our drivers, who also deserve to be protected. A lot of drivers have their own CCTV systems in their vehicles that do not meet the evidential standard, that probably are not entirely Data Act compliant and do not meet the required standards. And that brings a level of risk all to those individual drivers. We are trying to standardise an approach to protect the travelling public. And the cost is tax deductible. It is a tool of the trade. And it is to protect the driver as well as the travelling public.
Thank you. Councillor Irvine.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the concerns that have been put forward by the trade tonight, and I can understand where they're coming from. But I do wonder, you know, that if CCTV is introduced, and which will undoubtedly make travelling in a taxi feel more secure and safe for people. Knowing, you know, if the public knows in general that travelling in a taxi is even safer than it already is, might not that just be pretty good for business in a lot of ways? But the question I want to ask, and I can appreciate if this can't be answered, is that in 6.29 it says that only a small minority of licensing authorities so far mandated all vehicles be fitted with CCTV systems. But the experience of those authorities has been positive for both passengers and drivers. So I was just wondering if you have any evidence, anecdotal or otherwise, of the ways in which it's been positive for passengers and drivers.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can give you some specific examples of when myself and officers have investigated allegations. We've viewed CCTV systems and found sometimes the allegations to be false. So it comes down in favour of the licensed driver, where somebody maybe has made an allegation of sexual assault or that the driver has behaved improperly. It's helped us to carry out investigations and mitigate against any allegations that have been made. We also have instances where Sussex Police and Surrey Police have come to us with particular concerns about allegations of conduct by our licensed drivers and the presence of CCTV, and particularly a particular case where audio and visual CCTV is in existence. We were able to rebut that allegation. It means that we can carry out faster time, more effective investigations in support of our drivers in the majority of instances, and where drivers have behaved improperly or exhibited conduct that is not acceptable to the authority, we can then act swiftly to protect the travelling public and reputationally the reputation of the licensed trade, which in the main is incredibly good, but it has been hugely helpful in assisting us to carry out investigations. It has been hugely helpful in deterring and preventing crime and reducing concerns. I would certainly get in a licensed vehicle that has CCTV without concern, because it would act as a mechanism to record what's happened. And it's helped police colleagues and other regulatory partners in carrying out investigations. And it protects the driver. And those are first-hand experiences where we've been able to access CCTV systems and rebut or support allegations that have been made.
Thank you. Before I invite the next councillor, can I ask a couple of questions as well? It's mainly related to CCTV and mainly to the data protection. Are we going to carry out any data protection impact assessment? If yes, at what stage?
Chair, you'll note that there's a proposed 2-year implementation process. If the CCTV recommendations are to be mandated, we will need to draw in the services of specialist lawyers to help us draft those proposals. There will be very clear data protection practices that I think Mr. Carberry has already detailed to you, to make sure there are appropriate protections in place, to make sure that information is accessed appropriately, lawfully, and in specific circumstances, rightfully protecting the privacy of licensed drivers who do use their licensed vehicles for different purposes as well as a licensed vehicle. I'd like to reassure members, as detailed in the report and as reiterated by Mr. Carberry, there will be very clear processes that we would have to follow to access systems, and we are already scoping different approaches with our neighbouring authorities about how it works for them and how we can ensure legal compliance, along with an equality impact assessment of such, and data protection and management processes.
Because, ICO office has previously warned that continuous audio recording is generally disproportionate and not compliant with data protection law. And also for mandatory, CCTV, because it's a high-risk processing under GDPR, bodies such as local government and TfL, they explicitly they recommend publishing DPIA and engaging with ICO where appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so again, the Information Commissioner and the Surveillance and Biometrics Commissioner are two separate entities, and it's really important to note the Home Office fully support CCTV, and it should be considered as public space surveillance. So the DPIA would be the first part of the process. So if members were minded to agree this proposal, the first part of this project, if you like, would be the data privacy impact assessment. So I am the council's operational lead for CCTV. So that work would be done, and Suraj Chowdhury, as head of legal service, countersigns that document to make sure it is lawful. That data privacy impact assessment would be published and viewable and under scrutiny by members of the public, but it would also go through the governance committee, as we would be taking on data controller responsibilities in a very different way to how we ever have done before.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I've listened to some of my colleagues mention my name as well. I think Councillor Crowe very nicely and gently mentioned I didn't probably miss the report. I did mention neighbouring authorities, not authority. I see Mid Sussex there, but I thought I might miss that. I go and search all the report again: Horsham, Reigate, Mole Valley, Wealdon. I didn't find any of the mention over there. It's been mentioned there. They're collecting a table at the moment where it's all important, but that information is not present in this report at this point in time. They are all thinking about it, but it's not there. So we are making a decision at this point in time what is available in front of us. And in front of us is a Mid Sussex only. And Mid Sussex only, Chair, operates on, you can switch off, has been confirmed by the trade as well. And I personally checked with some of the people as well. You can switch off when you are in a personal use. So we're making a decision at the moment what is present in this report. We're not making a decision at the moment where it's saying, oh, is in the pipeline. We haven't seen it. It's not there. Our job as a members is to look after this and see what is present there. And I can only see Mid Sussex. If Councillor Crowe can point me on to any of the other authorities, I'll be very happy to get myself corrected. And I'm just, what I'm trying to say at the moment is, Chair, we are minded to that. Is safeguarding is quite important. But given that what's happening, we have seen over the last few months and years, the trade in Crawley is heavily impacted by so many external factors. Living in cost of living crisis, they are already going through quite a difficult time. And this is not a level playing field for them. I'm not against it. I'm absolutely all in for it. But there is a time and a place for it. And I don't think it's mandated. There are all other authorities which are talking about it, or leave it to the drivers. Yes, you will have it, but you can opt in it. If they want to opt in it, if they feel like they're being threatened, trade can have it. But having that mandatory and with all those mayors on it, I couldn't find Mid Sussex has that all the time on. So I don't know what I'm looking at, but I'm just trying to point this in that way. I'm looking at this report, which is in front of me. It's only mentioned one authority. It's not mentioned any other authority.
Thank you. Please.
Chair, Mid Sussex were referenced because they were one authority that responded to the consultation. So I have a table in front of me that gives me an overview. Ada District Council have mandated CCTV. Audio, as would be indicated here, would be allowed by way of the trigger or panic button mechanism. Brighton and Hove have mandated CCTV in different guises. We have Eastbourne and Lewis councils who have mandated CCTV, although without audio at this time, but they have an option to install a panic button, and audio is installed and can be activated via that panic button. We have Mid Sussex, which has been detailed already. Rother are in the process of mandating CCTV, and that is going to their licensing committee. Audio would be operated by way of panic button and visual capabilities. Wealdon, again, are in the process of mandating CCTV, due to commence on the 1st of October this year, but that's dependent on specifications and so on being finalised. Audio and visual capabilities. Worthing have mandated CCTV. Audio only allowed by way of trigger or panic button functions, which is what is for consideration here. Reigate and Banstead is currently mandating the provision of CCTV to include, it would appear, both audio and visual capabilities for Hackney Carriage vehicles only, with an implementation timetable of April 2027, and the specifications will be the same as Transport for London. Guildford have mandated the CCTV, both audio and visual capabilities, audio by way of trigger switch, which is what is proposed here. Other Sussex authorities and Surrey authorities are on that journey, also considering the same options. I could go on, but I'm mindful of the time, and there are a number of authorities who have already mandated. The reason I didn't include it in the report was because Mid Sussex were the only ones that directly responded to the consultation. But hopefully the information I provided to you today has provided an overview of many councils who have mandated the requirements and who are having regard to the statutory standards, the Casey report, and similar concerns to this authority?
Yes, Councillor Nawaz. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I understand, and I think they're all right. They're all mandatory, but they're not implementation dates on many things been mentioned. I was looking as well. I did research a lot, and Uncle Google tells you a lot of things nowadays. But my question is, I'm making the decision on the report in front of me that clearly says there's some data missing in this report, which does mean if all this information in front of us, it could have been help us to make the decision in that way. But given that the information is missing, it point me into that direction saying, do we need to think about this data needs to be added? And this report, then we probably able to make a better decision. And what the trade has made some comments and our own research on there. So all that list been mentioned, which is really good, but it's missing in this report. And I think probably this does give us a chance this to be added, and this report needs to be brought back. And then we can have a better discussion and a decision, an informed decision, I would say. Thank you.
Yeah. Please.
Chair, I don't mean to lecture the committee in any way, shape or form, but I think this is an important point. The statutory taxi standards are the standards. The decisions made by other licensing authorities is irrelevant to this decision. Your decision must be based upon the statutory taxi standards and public safety in Crawley, not based upon the decisions that are made by other licensing authorities. It's not in the report because it was not relevant information in terms of your decision as the committee about whether you support the implementation on the grounds of public safety, or as a committee you are minded not to introduce it because you feel that there is a legitimate reason in terms of public safety not to do it. The decision for all of these other authorities is a decision for their committee. If they choose not to, they need to answer to the Department for Transport in the same way that we did. And just to be, that isn't that isn't a distant concept. Corinne and I were interviewed by the Department for Transport last week and asked very directly around all of the statutory standards. What have we introduced? If we have not introduced it, why not? And where were the minutes for the committee meeting in which it was discussed? So like I said, I don't mean to lecture you, but it doesn't need to be in the report because it is not relevant information in terms of your decision for the statutory taxi standards.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the report, and thank you for all the gentlemen who are here this evening from the taxi people. It just shows how important this is to them. I do notice that, sadly, we don't have female taxi drivers. I assume that if we did, this report would be very useful for them. As a female myself, I find it quite scary sometimes to get into a car where I don't know the driver. It's important this day and age that we don't point fingers at people. We are becoming a society, I feel, where we jump up and down at the slightest thing and put blame on certain members of our people who live here. So this is one area I think is so important that we can keep our taxi drivers safe. Yes, we can keep our girls safe too, and that's another issue that is really worrying everybody at the moment, and fingers are pointing at certain people saying how awful they are and everything, and it's getting to a point where it is frightening. So it's important that we stop this now by having a relevant, worthwhile CCTV operation in the car so we can really make sure our drivers who do such a fantastic job, so I wouldn't like to do the job because I think they're on their own, they drive for miles. It must be quite scary and lonely. This is something that would really keep them safe, and that safety is so important whether you're male or female. I also want to presume that the consultation was done online because that's come up. And also, you talked about tax deductible for the equipment, sorry. Does this mean that if you're self-employed, it becomes an asset and can be offset against the tax, which would help, surely, in the financial aspect of it, which I feel, in the long run, putting that money in, I know it's going to be hard, but I think the turnaround of it would be so good because they'd have peace of mind that they're going to be safe, and that is the most important thing, I think, to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Chair, thank you. Councillor Burgess, yes, thank you. Indeed, we do have female drivers. We have drivers from all sections of the community, incredibly diverse, I'm proud to say. It's not just about the safety of females, it's about vulnerable people that are being transported in our licensed vehicles. And it's about keeping both the drivers and passengers safe. I'd like to draw your attention to section 6.29 of the report, which make reference to in-vehicle visual and audio recording CCTV and the importance of it and how valuable it can be when implemented. I'm afraid I'm not a tax expert, but as a tool of the trade, elements associated with costs to do with a licensed driver or licensed vehicle can be offset, so I believe, but I am not a tax expert, but that is a known fact that certain aspects can be offset as a cost associated to the business. Vehicle licences are renewed annually. This authority has an 11-year age policy for its licensed vehicles, so theoretically a system could be there, subject to certain other provisos, for the lifetime of that vehicle. There are obviously lots of factors that you and your colleagues will need to consider today. But again, if I've said it once, I've said it a number of times, and I apologise again. It's about public safety.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've read the report carefully, and I also want to thank our officers who prepared a report building on our discussions at the previous committee. And I think that's clarified quite a few points, and that was certainly worth doing after the last committee meeting. Although I have some misgivings about the removal of the top boxes and the door signage for private hire vehicles, to insist on keeping it would be in the face of the advice we've been given from the government on best practice, and keeping it, more importantly, would also complicate the next change proposed, which I support. That is for vehicles operating at Gatwick Airport to replace their teal plates with yellow licence plates. I support that because there are drivers at Gatwick who are being prevented from doing wider work, such as school run contracts, and given the increasingly competitive nature of the trade currently, which was referred to by some of the people who presented earlier, it would be wrong to do anything that would prevent or inhibit that. And I am fairly relaxed with the implementation date proposed for this one. Where I am not personally supportive of the proposals is the mandatory introduction of CCTV. Now, I've thought about this carefully, and I really don't believe this is something we need to do at this current time, because I'll give you the reasons. Any driver can choose to install this and be their own data controller, or indeed if a private hire company were to decide this was their selling point and require their drivers to have it, then this council wouldn't prevent them. But on this, it's difficult to ignore that there's still significant resistance to CCTV at this time. The taxi and public surveys both came back with substantial majorities expressing their opposition to this. And indeed, I suspect most, if not all, members of the committee would have got an email late last night from the Hackney Carriage Association expressing its opposition to its mandatory implementation. Whether they've seen that email is another matter, but they've had it. I would point out again that the phrase was there are councils that are on journeys towards this. That's not the same as it's implemented. And as far as I'm aware, there's only currently a handful of other local authorities in Sussex that has mandatory CCTV. That was to my knowledge. I mean, I've heard a bit more tonight. But this is not something where there's an argument that we're lagging behind everyone else. We aren't. I was interested about TfL because the last thing I could see on that was in June 2024. And it still seemed to be on a voluntary basis. Now perhaps that's changed because I can't see anything in any report since. But that's because I'm relying on looking at the internet while we were having this discussion. I I think that we could defer this decision for another year, and so audio and visual recording capability and the inclusion of panic buttons would not need to be decided tonight either. I think I'm right in saying that one of the major objections for mandatory implementation with the council as data controller is that there would be no way for drivers to switch it off when using their vehicles for personal or family journeys. And while there would be that ability to do that if this was self-provided and they were their own data controllers. Now, from their perspective, I think wanting the ability not to have everything in their personal as well as their their professional lives recorded is understandable, and I'm reluctant to change that for now because of that. I'd just like to add as well, just I think a bit of context here, is that I think we need to be careful about avoiding creating alarm where there is none. I have never had a conversation with any resident, incidentally, who has said to me locally that they've been scared to use a taxi because of a lack of CCTV. And I have to say, until Councillor Burgess tonight, I don't actually remember anyone even saying to me that they've been afraid to get into a taxi. Look, I suppose where I feel a level of frustration here is if the Secretary of State wanted it to be compulsory for all authorities rather than us to make a decision, she needs to make it a legislative requirement, not just issue guidance. So I think hopefully people understand that. And now moving on to the other proposals. As for the other proposals, given this increasingly cashless age that we live in, I think we have come to the point where it's not reasonable to expect everyone to be carrying cash with them for taxi journeys. So I think expecting a facility for electronic payments is necessary and should be introduced. In practice, I must say, in tribute to the taxi trade in Crawley, that's never proved to be a problem when I've been in a taxi and requested to pay by card. But I would say it is in the customer's interests that it's needed. And I'm sorry to any taxi drivers who may have been resisting the technology, but in my view, we must require that it's adopted going forward. And also for safety reasons, I also support the vehicle standards for minimum tyre tread depth. And if I have missed any of the other recommendations, I apologise, but that's my feeling on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you want to come on any of the points?
Chair, just to reiterate the point, I think that it would not be the intention of this authority as the data controller were CCTV to be mandated to observe footage unnecessarily. It would be in very specific circumstances, and it's already been articulated by Mr. Carberry that would be carefully managed and overseen in specific circumstances which are sort of referred to in the body of the report. It's not going to be the case that we'll be looking at a vehicle when it's for personal use, unless there was potentially a complaint or an offence associated with that. There are very clear circumstances in which the CCTV, if mandated, would be utilised, and the panic button activated by either the driver or the passenger or the victim, whomever that may be, to record the conversations, because often we'll see CCTV that has a visual capability, and it might appear that someone is gesticulating and there's clearly an exchange taking place, but as the licensing authority and investigating officers, we can't hear what the nature of that exchange is. And sometimes that provides the vital piece to the puzzle to either support a complaint or rebut a complaint by either a passenger or a driver. You'd be surprised the number of complaints that we get against licensed drivers for overcharging, sexual impropriety, inappropriate natures of conversation that we aren't able to rebut at the moment. And in 98% of the cases, I side with our licensed drivers as drivers who have a good record, who are of good conduct. there is a small proportion of those drivers who don't behave appropriately, and we utilise different mechanisms in our enforcement process to manage those behaviours, to retrain, to re-educate, or indeed revoke or suspend licences in the more significant cases. But I'm afraid they do happen, and being part of the daytime and nighttime economies, often people in those licensed vehicles are under the influence of alcohol, drugs, and or maybe vulnerable persons being transported from A to B, for example, as part of a school contract, where the provision of CCTV in each of those instances, audio and visual capabilities, would be key in rebutting or supporting an investigation and protecting the public.
Thank you. Councillor Ayling.
Yeah, my question is, I'm guessing that the CCTV will be digital, and I just wondered how long the recordings will be kept by the CCTV before it gets recorded over. So it's assumably it'll be on a loop, say for a week or so, or month or so.
It's 30, or it's a calendar, so it's normally 31 days as a cycle, councillor, and systems are overridden after that period of time. That's one of the Home Office guidance. It's the conditions that are often attached in another regulatory regime as part of the Licensing Act 2003. In premises, it's a 31-day cycle that is retained for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Belvin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. You've obviously looked at CCTV because you've let some drivers, you proved that they were innocent. How many taxi drivers have we got that have got CCTV, please, as a percentage of the total?
Councillor Belbin, because it's not mandated, it's difficult to give you those specific figures. A number of our licensed drivers have opted to install their own CCTV systems with different recording capabilities, with different retention capabilities, and the data controller process is questionable or unknown. So I can't give you specific numbers, I'm afraid. I can say that through our enforcement process, there are a handful of drivers who have the CCTV system, which has audio and visual capabilities, which is operational at all times when the engine is turned on because of different issues associated with that driver. There are two in particular who come to mind who have both come to me separately and said that they are glad that those systems have been installed because it's helped to defend their position or counter allegations that have been made as part of a piece of work that we'll be looking, because it's not mandated. I can't give you those figures, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I was just interested because if those taxi drivers had decided to do this off their own back, then obviously they felt that it was a valid and good investment to make.
I think it would be fair to say a high proportion of our licensed vehicles do have CCTV systems installed. Many of their own volition. Our policy does cover the ability to install CCTV. A number of our licensed drivers, in fact probably more than a handful, have CCTV. The handful have the audio capability as well for the reasons that I've outlined. So it is fair to say a lot of licensed drivers do have CCTV systems of differing quality, which has helped us in part, in some instances, carry out an investigation. But with the absence of audio, it's proved particularly challenging if there's been an allegation of improper topics of discussion or suggestion made either by the passenger or a licensed driver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? All committee members have had the chance to speak, so we will move on to the vote. We will move the recommendation all together, but take the votes on the recommendations and their subsections one by one. As the chair, I'll move the recommendations. Can I ask the vice chair to please second?
I second.
Thank you. We will now take the votes. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to lead the voting process, please? Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned, we'll be taking the recommendations separately, including their subsections. Please can I have, unless otherwise specified, a show of hands for each part. Recommendation 2.1A has 4 parts and seeks to confirm whether various changes are required to private hire vehicle livery. So recommendation 2.1A1 relates to the removal of top boxes for private hire vehicles. Please can I have a show of hands for all those for the removal of top boxes for private hire vehicles? Okay, thank you. Any against? And abstentions? Thank you. Recommendation 2.1A1 is carried. Recommendation 2.1A2 relates to the removal of all door signage for private hire vehicles. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions? That's none. So recommendation 2.1A2 is also carried. Recommendation 2.1A3 relates to the removal of rear teal licence plates and their replacement with yellow licence plates for all private hire vehicles operating at Gatwick Airport. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Okay. Recommendation 2.1A3 is carried. So as the committee has agreed that all elements of the private hire vehicle livery set out in recommendations to 2.1A1 to 2.1A3 shall be removed, that negates the need for a vote on recommendation 2.1A4. So that's yeah. Okay, I'll move on to recommendation 2.1B. Recommendation 2.1B is to approve the rebranding and a change to permanent Hackney Carriage vehicle livery as set out in the report in paragraph 6.8 to determine which livery will be permanently affixed to the vehicle in accordance with council policy and Crawley Borough Council branding. For clarity, this relates to the proposed white signage found on page 75 of the meeting agenda. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions? Thank you. Recommendation 2.1B is carried. Recommendation 2.1C proposes that the agreed elements of recommendations 2.1A and B be subject to the proposed implementation period for vehicle livery matters to come into effect from the 1st of April 2026. Rather than a show of hands for this recommendation, can I ask if that is agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Recommendation 2.1C is carried then. Recommendation 2.1D is to confirm whether or not the council will require the inclusion of mandatory closed-circuit television in all Hackney Carriage and private hire licensed vehicles from the 1st of October 2027, operational at all times when the vehicle engine is on. If mandated, this would include audio and visual recording capability and inclusion of panic buttons for both licensed drivers and passengers. So all those for the requirement of the inclusion of mandatory closed-circuit television. Thank you. All those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. So that's 9 votes in favour, 6 votes against, and 0 abstentions. So recommendation 2.1D is carried. Recommendation 2.1E is to confirm that all licensed vehicles and or private hire operators offer the facility for passengers to make payment by electronic means in addition to cash payments. Rather than a show of hands, can I ask, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Recommendation 2.1E is carried. Recommendation 2.1F is to confirm that the vehicle standards be updated so that the minimum tyre tread depth on vehicles reflects the MOT standards in relation to vehicle safety and roadworthiness and is not less than 1.6 millimetres at any time. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That's recommendation 2.1F is carried. Recommendation 2.1G is to note the proposed implementation deadlines as detailed in the body of the report. Is that noted? Noted. Thank you. Recommendation 2.1H is to delegate to the Head of Community Services, in agreement with the Cabinet Member for Public Protection and the Chair and Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee, any revisions to the policy to reflect the changes agreed, with changes reflected in this policy no later than the 1st of February 2026. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So that's recommendation 2.1H, also carried. So the committee has passed recommendations 2.1A 1 through 4 and recommendations 2.1B through H. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7, animal licensing policy.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt you for a minute. I have a practical issue rather than a committee issue in that we are required to, well, we're not provided with paper copies of the agenda, and so we're using our laptops. Unfortunately, the PowerPoints don't appear to be working on this bench, and I'm going to be running out of power quite soon, so we're not quite sure whether I'll get for the next item or not. So a little bit of assistance might possibly. So I welcome Mr. Pedlow coming over. Thank you.
Well,
That's a simple solution.
we'll just take 2 minutes break. Thank you. Right. We'll now move on to item 7, animal licensing policy. We'll move on to the report HCS/098. Please will the team leader for health, safety and licensing present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update the Council's animal licensing policy to revise its layout, incorporate additional information in relation to the fit and proper person requirements, where applicable, and new sections relating to dangerous wild animals and primate licensing, as well as a proposed fee structure for primate licensing. Additionally, to set out the Council's approach in relation to the licensing and care of such under the Dangerous Wild Animal Act 1976 and the Animal Welfare Primate Licences in England Regulations 2004 that have recently been enacted. Particularly in relation to the primate licensing, it is a statutory function. The recommendations are set out in section 2 of the report to incorporate those matters I've just mentioned and incorporate information in relation to the various activities as listed. For ease of reference for members, the proposed changes are included in bold italics in the body of the proposed policy appended to the report at Appendix 2. It shows a table of those revisions, again for ease of reference, and delegate further revisions to the policy to the Head of Community Services in consultation with the Portfolio for Public Protection and the Chair of the Licensing Committee. So the Council agreed to adopt a policy covering animal licensing welfare activities and provides a framework for decision-making in relation to various animal-related licensable activities administered and regulated in the borough. You are aware that the policy was adopted primarily initially under the Animal Activity Licensing Regime, also referred to as LAYA, and incorporates references to legislation, regulations and guidance to ensure that it remains current. Section 4 gives you the background. As I've mentioned previously, it's to incorporate additional sections in relation to the fit and proper test for dangerous wild animals as classified under the Dangerous Wild Animal Act 1976 and primate licensing, which is a new inclusion which has only recently come into being from April of this year. So the enforcement section of the policy has been expanded to incorporate additional mechanisms, an inclusion of a fee structure agreed in respect of all animal licensing activities. It's important to note that those fee structures primarily relate to primate licensing. You've already agreed the fee structure in relation to other matters and other minor revisions as set out in the table in the Appendix A and Appendix 2 of the policy. Section 5 gives you the context of the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. Chair, unless I'm directed otherwise, I don't propose to read that verbatim based on the assumption that members will have already read the policy. The animal welfare primate licensing is detailed at section 5.5 and provides a new statutory requirement on licensing authorities to license those private individuals who may keep primates. Chair, members of the committee would be surprised at the number of people that choose to keep a range of animals which might include marmosets, ptarmigans, squirrel monkeys, spider monkeys, capuchins, lemurs and other bush baby type of species. There are some exemptions to the requirements to hold a licence under primate licensing, and those are detailed in the report as well. We don't currently have any known primate keepers in the Crawley Borough, but figures from the RSPCA indicate that there are a number across the country, and we are starting to do some work with veterinary surgeries that if they have known keepers of primates on their books, that they share information from us as the licensing authority to make sure that they're aware that a licence under the new regime is now required. And as I've stated in the body of the report and in the appendices, there's the fee structure that is proposed, comprising of a Part A, an application fee, and Part B, which is a grant fee for any such licence. I want to make it clear that there will be additional charges associated with veterinary costs, as the authority will need to instruct the support of qualified vets to assist us when assessing applications for primates and dangerous wild animals, and the applicant or licence holder would be required to meet those veterinary assessment costs and report costs. Hopefully that's given you an overview of what is proposed. There isn't currently a legislative requirement to produce a policy for animal licensing activities, but it helps provide a framework and ensures that the authority is transparent in its practices for making decision-making, enforcement and regulation of those activities that require regulation and wider animal welfare requirements. As you're aware, as far as possible, the licensing regime should be self-funding without recourse to general funds. And to make it clear, staff must be qualified inspectors to carry out the inspection and fulfil the legal responsibilities for the licensing authority. I can confirm that I'm a qualified animal inspector and I have staff members who are going on that same course and journey to become qualified. And we do undertake regular training to make sure that we retain our competence. It's unclear at the moment about the level of demand for primate licences or indeed dangerous wild animal licences. We don't have any of those listed at this time. We will be doing some positive marketing, as I've said, through veterinary surgeries and with our communications department to highlight the need to be licensed and raise it into the public domain. And we do have a public register as well, detailing all of our animal activity licences that are currently in operation, and it would be likely that these activities would also be listed. You'll see in section 7 of the report the general overview of the legal considerations and human rights considerations that you need to think about, and an equalities impact assessment included at Appendix B. So I would ask that members consider the proposed inclusions and the fee structure as part of the debate and discussion. But of course, I'm happy to take any questions that may arise from this.
Thank you. The committee will now consider the matter. Committee members wishing to speak should raise their hand and officers will respond to the queries one by one. Thanks. Do we have any questions? Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. So very brief one, I think. I mean, the one thing I just draw to members' attention, something I'm proud this council does, is although legislation does largely prohibit the use of wild animals in circuses, there are some that escape that overall ban, such as horses, dogs, and birds in circus performances. But I'm proud that we've got in our policy that the council land will not be permitted for the use of that, and that's something we. I think it was policy, but it wasn't necessarily enshrined in writing. But we put that in a couple of years ago now. I think it's and.
I think it's a year ago.
Oh, it's a year ago. Yes, it doesn't time not go as quick as you think then. But I'm pleased we did that. The question I have, I was more sort of out of interest, almost as a corporate parent here, because of the zoo. Chair, just I see that we're largely exempt because we're a licensed zoo, I assume. So nothing in this policy would have any impact. But we do have primates at the zoo. We have some lovely lemurs, I believe. So I'm just wondering if there's anything here that might affect what the council needs to do. Thank you.
Councillor, as your zoo inspector, I can confirm that the activities associated with Tilgate Zoo are covered under the Zoo Licensing Act 1981. The primate licensing regulations and legislation that have come in very recently relate to private keepers. And rather than what we have seen in the past is primate keepers of small monkeys and so on, treating them like a member of the family. These standards enshrine a requirement that they are kept in zoo conditions, zoo-like conditions, a high standard of welfare is maintained, and they are allowed to exhibit natural behaviours and kept in a suitable environment, not sitting on the sofa on somebody's shoulder watching the television, for example. And I am being rather flippant in relation to that, but that's not an untrue picture. So it's looking to ensure that the 5 welfare needs of those species, their diet, their environment, their ability to exhibit natural behaviours and other things are met, but to the same standards required in a zoo, and to regulate some of those private individuals who keep those types of species in perhaps not the entirely most appropriate conditions currently, but the zoo will not be impacted by this. We will be reviewing the policy in due course to factor in a section to incorporate zoo licensing, but that'll obviously be at a later juncture for you and your colleagues to determine at that appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess, please.
You've got a very thorough report, thank you. I'm just wondering about, it's probably a silly question, but you talk about domestic animals and the breeding, etc. What happens if someone decides that they're going to just breed their pet cat or something? Do they have to come forward for a licence before they do that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are certain provisos. There are a number of tests that we need to set to see whether they fall within the regulatory regime. There are 10 tests that we utilise, including advertising, costs and so on. So yes, if you want to breed your cat, your dog, if you want to board, home board or commercially board dogs, if you want to hire out horses in the conventional sense of a riding school, if you want to sell and breed puppies, yes, you require a licence subject to certain tests being fulfilled. There are some exemptions, but I would probably be here for the remainder of the evening taking you through those exemptions, and I'm sure you don't want to necessarily hear that. But if you would like some private information on that, of course, I'm happy to assist.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'll just make a couple of statements. I think members will rightly be proud that the UK generally has some of the best animal welfare laws in the world. You know, some countries are shocking, quite frankly. You know, and you know, I've been in Brazil, for example, where you know I've been offered a little monkey for sale as a pet for somebody in the street. You know, I welcome as well the council's policies around circuses. I know in the past sporadically members get emails around goldfish being given out as prizes and things like that, and we've never done anything like that, or certainly not in the last 20 or 30 years or so in Crawley on any of our land. So I welcome that we update and refresh the policy as required to ensure that people with unusual animals are deemed to be fit and proper people for the welfare of those animals, but also actually for public safety as well. What I didn't see in the report is any reference to snakes. Now, and I've just done a search for the word snake just in case I've missed it on the Adobe search. I couldn't find anything. And we do know that exotic pets are becoming more popular. And you know there are different types of snakes. So obviously there are snakes that can be poisonous. They would tend to be smaller, and I suspect we don't have too many of those. But I do recall, I think it was in Canada about a decade or so ago, where very tragically two young boys who were sleeping in an apartment were suffocated to death by a boa constrictor that had escaped from, I think, a pet shop that was, I think, beneath where the boys were sleeping, and it killed them in their sleep. So, and just today I saw a picture of on social media of a constrictor in a road in the UK. It wasn't a huge snake, but it was enough of a snake to cause concern. But you know, there's a serious point here around the safety of snakes and the popularity of them, and also people not realising, especially with reptiles more generally, actually, that they can get large, or even turtles. Certain types of turtles could become quite dangerous. So I'm just curious to know sort of where we stand in relation to sort of snakes and turtles.
Thank you, Chair. A number of businesses that are selling animals as pets do have to have a licence. If they then wish to stock and supply dangerous wild animals, and that can relate to certain venomous species, some lizards and some snakes, as you refer, some invertebrates and spiders, they do have to have a dangerous wild animal licence as well, and those species have to be kept in very clear and careful circumstances with certain medical facilities available if someone gets bitten. Staff have to be appropriately trained and qualified to keep those. What we do see in, I guess, for want of a better expression, the standard pet shops is that the venomous species are not being kept. Therefore, we don't have dangerous wild animal licences in addition to the animal activity licence. But there would have to be very careful controls, and we would instruct a vet to assist us in the inspection of those types of species if licences were sought, to make sure that appropriate checks and balances, if you like, were in place. In inclusion to the dangerous wild animal licence regime, you're looking at certain types of birds, for example, emus and spiders, as I've said, so they would be covered under the Dangerous Wild Animal Act requirements as well as the animal activity licensing requirements. So 2 licenses, if you like, to add that extra layer of protection and welfare compliance, if you like. We don't have any dangerous wild animals listed currently, but again, that's a piece of work that we're doing to pick that up, to educate people about the requirement and the need for licenses. Sorry, a rather lengthy answer, but hopefully that helps.
I can just very quickly come back. So that applies to all animals that can potentially be dangerous. So I referenced boa constrictors, which most times you could pick one up and it would not be dangerous, but there is certainly the potential for them to be if unattended and around children in particular. So I'll just it gets a bit of a, when you talk about dogs and what have you and what could be dangerous at times, but I would say that boa constrictors in particular could be potentially dangerous for children. That's the tragic case that I referenced earlier.
Councillor, yes, indeed. Certain venomous species are covered under the Dangerous Wild Animal Act. I could be here for the remainder of the evening and give you a list of those vehicles that are caught or not caught as part of the regulatory regime, but they would be covered, potentially, yes.
Yes, please.
I think Councillor Crow's point, I think our advice to residents is this. If you are considering getting a pet of that nature, make sure that you are experienced or you're being guided by somebody that does have experience. So as somebody who has historically kept snakes as pets, you're exactly right. A tame and controlled snake can be good-tempered, but can turn very, very quickly. So our advice is, if you have an animal that is capable of that, making sure that those that are handling that animal or that snake are confident and competent to do so. We can't restrict individual households in terms of those pets, and you gave the examples of dogs. So our advice is make sure that you know what you're doing when you are committing to a pet.
And if I may supplement that, please purchase a pet from a licensed setting, not from a car park or a person that you think you know. Please do it through a licensed setting to be assured that that setting has been properly assessed by qualified officers and the conditions in which the animal is being kept has been assessed and the competence of people caring for those animals. There is a requirement that where a species is being sold, for example, under the licensing regime of sale of animals as pets and under the Dangerous Wild Animal Act, to provide potential purchasers with information about that species, how big it's going to be, what its dietary requirements are, what its space requirements are, the level of risk associated with that species. And actually our licence settings are required, if they're not content that that person is going to be able to accommodate that species correctly or does not have the competence, they're not allowed to sell and they have a refusals register.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Right. All committee members have had the chance to speak, so we will move on to the vote. As the chair, I'll move the recommendations all together. Can I ask the vice chair to please second?
I second the recommendations.
Thank you. We will now take the votes. For ease, I propose that all recommendations from 2.1A to F, which can be found on page 123 of the meeting agenda, be voted on together. Do any committee members have any objections to this approach? If so, please raise your hand and state which recommendations you would like to be voted upon separately. Right. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to lead the voting process, please? Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are that the committee A, agrees to incorporate information relating to activities relating to those animals classified as dangerous wild animals within the animal licensing policy included at Appendix A to the report. B, agrees to incorporate information relating to activities relating to those animals falling within the new licensing regime as primates within the animal licensing policy included at Appendix A to the report. C, agrees the fee structure in respect of the above as set out in Appendix 1 of the Animal Licensing Policy in respect of primate licensing. D, agrees the proposed revisions to the Animal Licensing Policy in relation to the fit and proper person test where applicable. E, agrees other minor revisions to the policy in terms of form and content as set out in the table included in Appendix 2 of the Animal Licensing Policy. And F, delegates any further minor revisions to the policy to the Head of Community Services in consultation with the portfolio holder for public protection and the chair of the Licensing Committee. Please can I have a show of hands for all those in favour? That's 15, thank you. All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Recommendations 2.1A through F are carried.
Thank you. Item 8, upcoming constitutional changes. Item 8 is a verbal update for information only. As a result of discussion between myself and officers, there are two aspects of the Constitution that we feel need amending. The first relates to speaking rights at the Licensing Committee, and the second relates to findings of an audit into food safety where it was recommended that a tweak be made to the licensing functions in relation to the Health and Safety Act. In terms of the speaking rights, there has been some confusion over the Hackney Carriage and private hire trades speaking rights at the committee informally in relation to the taxi items. To ensure a more consistent approach, we are looking to formally mirror in the Constitution the procedures has been used tonight. That is a total of 3 5-minute speaking slots, one each for individuals from bodies representing the trades. The standard public question time item will remain. These constitutional changes will be considered by the Governance Committee on 13th October, with the recommendation that the full council approve them on 22nd October. For openness, I'm bringing this to the attention of the Licensing Committee for its information only. I do not intend to hold a debate tonight on these matters. Thank you. Item 9, supplementary agenda. There is no supplementary supplemental agenda, so the business of the committee is concluded. I declare the meeting closed at 21:12. Thank you.